Welcome back to Madam Quest New Horizons. I'm Day Darling. As you see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today. And I know I said I was going to do some Happy Home Paradise the weekend, but it was a last minute thing where I am going to be busy later this afternoon, and so I need to get ready, I suppose, after recording this episode. So this episode is going to be probably on the slightly shorter side. But yeah, we're basically going to have a go see Encanto, which was a Disney movie I wanted to see, and I feel like I haven't seen like an animated movie. Well, when's the last time I went to go see a movie? I can't remember. I guess Dune or something, which it didn't quite appeal to me. But if you like it personally, then by all means, you do you, I suppose. Hello there, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 1:34 p.m. on Sunday, January 9th, 2022. KK Side is playing a very special concert on today. That was new dialogue. So she actually explains why KK Side does concerts on Sunday instead of on Saturdays. Of course, yesterday was a fishing tourney, which we kind of didn't really participate in, but yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to talk about today. I'm just trying to think when the last time I've actually seen a Disney movie is. You know, Disney movies are not particularly well known for having the most like deep stories or anything like that, because you know, I suppose in a certain sense, they try to appeal to children and that sort of thing. And then there's the argument, of course, that children can handle much more complicated story ideas and that sort of thing than you might expect. Which is certainly true, but of course it's sort of a balance as well, because, you know, sometimes children also don't find it particularly interesting. I believe we have both of these. The robust statue, I believe, is right. This one that looks like a forgery to me, because he's got bangs. So we're just going to sort of vibe out and do our usual thing. Yeah, I mean, I always think children can handle much more complicated, I suppose, stories than you might expect them perhaps to be able to, but it's sort of just like the way you present it, I think, ends up being the more important way. Things should be simplified down into certain aspects, because otherwise, you know, certain things like nuances and specific intricacies might go over the head, and you might end up giving the wrong impression compared to exactly what you wanted to portray, which is obviously less than ideal when it compares to just portraying a very simple moral, I suppose, and that sort of thing. It always reminds me when we studied Aesop's Fables back in year 2 or whatever. Well, we studied the fables, and I can't remember which ones we studied. I'll talk about that in a sec. But there was a thing that basically in all of the stories at the end, whatever book our teacher was reading from, she just read it out, and then just at the end, but always said very explicitly what the moral of the story was for Aesop's Fable. And I don't know if those were particularly built into Aesop's Fables. I can't imagine Aesop as a writer just wrote out these, like, you know, pretty well written fables and that sort of thing, and we just put like a footnote at the end being like, the moral of this story is something 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 something. I'd imagine it must have been because it was a curriculum approved book or whatever. It was just for the people who wrote the book and who were part of the curriculum wanted to spell out exactly for the children. I don't know if this one's legitimate or not, so we're going to buy it anyway, because I think this is the half we don't have. Or is it the left half we don't have? I honestly can't remember, so we're just going to buy this anyway. We'll keep on keeping on. Yeah, so I don't know, I talked to Cyrus or said it's wrong person. Apologies, I thought you were talking to me for some reason. Instead I just ruined their flow. No, yeah, it would just like really explicitly spell out exactly what moral story you were meant to learn, like the one with the crow and the fox or whatever. And there's like a story goes, there's like a crow in a tree, she's got like a piece of cheese, and then there's a fox, and the fox just keeps on flattering the crow, being like, oh, you know, you look at your feathers today, they're so pretty, and you know how gracefully you fly or whatever, and your voice is so beautiful and whatever, and then the crow gets all flattered, and then the fox is like, wouldn't you care to sing me a small melody? And then the crow starts singing, and then the fox drops a piece of cheese that the crow had that was sitting in the crow's mouth, and then the fox just gobbles up the cheese and just leaves. And then it just says it's so distinctly in my mind. But so distinctly that she reads out the moral afterwards, but I can't even remember what moral is. It's something like flattery begets something, or like don't insincere flattery is something. Hold on. This is where, you know, perhaps the lesson didn't quite get through to my head. Crow and the Fox Aesop Fable, where apparently we need to spell out the conclusion that you're meant to draw from it even more explicitly for me, because it apparently didn't quite stay in my head, huh? The Fox and the Crow, there we go. Now may my crystal guide you. I don't know what you said, but I'm sure it was great. Let's go harvest some Nook Mar missions. Flatteries thrive. Oh, hold on. The poem is taken as a caution against listening to flatterers. Delight in treacherous flattery usually pays a penalty by repentance and disgrace. Okay, I don't think it uses quite those fanciful words when I was like 6. Fox delivers a moral way of recompense. Flattery thrives on fool's credulity. The lesson's worth a cheese, don't you agree? But to the crow shamefaced and flustered swore, too late, however, nevermore. What? I don't remember any of these. Fox's funeral? What? The fox dies? Whatever's going on? There's a song? I have no idea what's going on. Apparently there's a lot of interpretations of this. Not interpretations, sorry, I'm like... presentations of it. Okay, well, I don't know. And, you know, I was thinking back to that because I thought it sort of like ruined the point of like actually coming to the conclusion of the story yourself. Because, you know, even though I probably didn't so explicitly think this way when I was in year 2 or whatever, you know, part of me always sees art as like a two-way thing, you know. The artist always probably, not always I suppose, but most of the time has some sort of intention with their art, like some sort of story, moral, teaching that they want to give or something they want to talk about or comment on, etc, etc. You know, that's quite a common thing in the art world, certainly when you're writing any or creating any sort of medium. But the other half of art is really on the consumer side and the personal side and what interpretations and what lessons you take from that, and often they can sort of vary from person to person. Things, you know, someone might look at a piece of art and see it as like an expression of the cruelty or the depression of the world, or someone like that, and someone else might see in it and see as that like a spark of hope, like rejuvenating through what seems to, you know, the end of a cycle of sadness, etc, etc, of course. And people, you know, draw upon their own personal experiences, and from there they will, you know, by drawing on their own personal experiences, they will sort of merge with the artistic intent of the actual piece in the first place, and then together it will create our own personal story and conclusion that you will, you know, I suppose come to through your own sense. I don't know if this is one of the special islands or not, because it is currently winter. I don't know if you can actually get one of the special islands during the season. I'm inclined to think this is a special island because it has a snowflake wall as a recipe, which is a bit unusual. But yeah, it always seemed a little bit strange to me that that conclusion is so explicitly spelled out for you for Aesop's Fables, being like, this is what you learned from it. Which I guess is kind of different in the regards of Aesop's Fables, which are initially, I think, created to teach certain like moral lessons or whatever in a simplified way, in a sort of like a, not analogous way, but like what's the word? When you have like your own like evidence, own story. I don't know, there's a word for it, I can't think of it right now, but so I suppose the circumstances around it are a little bit different rather than something which is a bit more like a free-form expression, like, I don't know, like a Renaissance piece of artwork or something. Yeah, it was always a little bit strange. Every single one of those fables follows its own sort of step, tell the story, then you have your own conclusion. And unsurprisingly, I suppose one of the last things we had to do to wrap up that like section that we were learning about fables and that sort of thing is we had to write our own fable. I can't remember what mine explicitly was about, but it was called How the Crow Got Its Wings, or something like that. I think this was in the same time as Aesop's Fables. I'm not entirely sure when I think about it, but yeah, it was about how the crow got their wings. I don't really remember the story, except for some reason in the story the crow was born without wings, and then, you know, they like eventually developed wings. It's like they created their own wings and they used it to fly, and then eventually the wings sort of became molded as in part of their person or part of their person, and that sort of, you know, was a thing about how the crow got the wings. Of course, you know, that's not really how crows, you know, get wings in the first place. It's not like 6-year-old me just like spitting on the face of evolution or anything like that, you know. it's more just a way of fanciful writing, and you're meant to draw some sort of conclusion from it. Except I don't remember what the conclusion was. Maybe it was some sort of like hard work begets reward in some sort of thing, in a very sort of roundabout way. I mean, I was like 6, you know. I'm not going to say my creative writing skills are the pinnacle of their form, so perhaps I'm reading a bit too much into it, but, you know, I can't help but, you know, while I'm speaking out loud about it right now, I can't help but think that maybe, you know, so explicitly writing the conclusion at the end of a story was actually quite helpful, I suppose, to the teacher, because you know, kids, you read a story, you know, they have intentions, good intentions, and by the way, it's not meant to me to like discouraging children from writing or anything. I think it's awesome, of course, but you know, as an adult reading it, you read into it and you don't really see that much subtlety, probably. There's only so much like nuance a kid has been exposed to, and you know, basically what I'm trying to say is 6-year-old kids tend to not be world-renowned authors for good reason. But it's, or you know, you got to start somewhere. You know, sucking is kind of a first step to being kind of good at something, in the infamous words of Jake the dog, which is from Adventure Time, and I've also never seen it. So, but yeah, I'd imagine it's probably very useful for our year 1 teacher, who, you know, she has to read all these stories, and you know, she has to try and understand exactly what the child is going for. If she just skips to the end and see the child is, you know, wrote the what's the word? The child wrote the moral conclusion that you were meant to learn from, and she just goes, oh, okay. Now, you know, armed with this knowledge, I can see where my student was coming from when they're trying to write out the story, and then it gives a bit more of a grounds for more actionable feedback. Since I'm sure as a teacher, a lot of the difficulty stems from trying to even understand what your student's even going for in the first place, and having the thought process, I suppose, in mind while reading it is probably beneficial in that regard. Beneficial in that regard to actually trying to make any heads or tails of it. Now, might I be reading into this a little bit too much? Yeah, probably. But I don't know. It always feels like, to me, which maybe this did happen, I just don't remember, which is perfectly fair. It has been, you know, quite a few years since we had these teachings about Aesop fables, or fables in general. But the teacher read a story out to us, and we were meant to come to our own conclusions and have a discussion about that. And then she tells us what the regarded fable, I suppose, moral teaching is from that lesson in itself. You know, and then you get the best of both worlds, sparking discussion and sparking analytical, like a much more analytical eye to evaluate exactly how that moral is presented. Boom, 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 boom. Already absolutely laying down with sick beats. I was trying to find who our crafter is today. I think it's only Tank or Phoebe who is not out of hours, so, you know, we'll be checking on them. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've talked about Aesop's fables before, but there's sort of thing where I need to, you know, look at my YouTube studio and see if it's come up. If it hasn't, then fantastic. A new title for an episode. I'm also like, I will say my backlog is like, what? Oh, the fabled blue rose. Oh, and everything, of course, is bug fables. That makes sense. I don't know why I would expect anything else. I have a tiny backlog right now because tomorrow, I suppose, is the final episode of Later Alligators coming up. I haven't even drawn the next thumbnail art for one shot, which I was meant to do today, but of course now I'm going to be busy in the afternoon, so that's probably not going to happen. So I guess I'll have to do it tomorrow, and I have till Thursday, I suppose, to complete it. I now have a Babazu little bit of a backlog because I recorded some yesterday, but I've got one episode of an RA backlog, so I'm gonna have to build up that backlog a little bit again when I particularly can. But you know, at some point maybe the Let's Plays might just stop at some point, and there might just be a mini hiatus. I don't really know how things go, so if that happens, do not be alarmed. I will say, as Angel Gabriel came down to the Maiden Mary, of course, herself. Do not be afraid. I don't know if that actually happened. By the way, so don't quote me on that. Anyway. Fables. Anyway, oh yeah, Disney. Yeah, so Disney tend to have much more simplified fables and that sort of stories and that sort of thing. But you know, I feel like kids can always handle a bit more. And it's not to say that Disney haven't done probably much more interesting sort of stories and teachings, a bit more nuance into them, I'd imagine. But you know, not all the time. I'm trying to think of one with because I think Zootopia had an interesting one about, especially to do with like discrimination. I suppose it's a bit perhaps on the nose, you know. It's perhaps what people always do when they have like animals and anthropomorphized into living in like a human society, quote unquote. Is always discrimination tends to be one which is covered a little bit. Do I think I covered it quite well enough? It's kind of like iffy. It's not the best. And I suppose there's an argument to be made that it's not really about discrimination, more it is about deceptive appearances. You know, the fact that Nick, who is meant to be like a criminal, which he is a criminal, let's be clear, at the start of a movie, ends up being one with a heart of gold, and the innocent sheep, spoilers for Zootopia, or Zootropolis if you're in England, what's her name, like Miss Bellwether or something, ends up being the big villain behind the entire thing, and how the lion and the mayor is like not actually in control or something, I don't really remember. Yeah, but then you get things like, what am I doing up here? Oh, I was just getting changed, that's why. Then you get things like Frozen, which are not Frozen 2 especially. Frozen 1 I'm going to give a pass because, whatever, is the first of a thing, and Frozen 2 is clearly meant to be something which, probably in some certain sense, or every sort of sense, a cash grab, let's be fair. But, I'm not going to say the Disney creators and the creative team behind it didn't want to put their own sort of like, flair on it, as I'd imagine most people who work in that sort of creative industry, even if they are not particularly agreeable with the decision to make something in the end, will still put that best effort, hopefully, into creating it. Or maybe not, I don't know. But Frozen 2, I'm sort of like a... I'm not really sure what the moral is. It's kind of just more like a vehicle to get some good songs out. Get Idina Menzel and Kristen Bell singing and performing some fantastic songs, and, get more merchandise, I suppose, going on. Because, spoilers for Frozen 2, everything basically lives, and there's essentially no consequences, from what I recall, of what happens. And a bit of a strange past where it turns out their ancestors were like pretty bad people, something like that. And like not like enslaving the whole population or something, but like ruining and exploiting their trust, etc., which is a bit questionable. But there's no sort of like repentance or in that sort of an aspect. And then also it seems like, oh no, Elsa might die, but of course it's Disney, so Elsa's not going to die. It's like, oh no, Olaf might die. Okay, it's Disney, Olaf's not going to die. And then you go, oh no, Arendelle might be like absolutely crushed by a tidal wave. And this time you might be like, oh, maybe this will actually happen, because Arendelle is not such a permanent affair compared to Elsa and Olaf, who are very much like titular characters. And oh no, Arendelle is like saved because like Elsa somehow rides faster than a tidal wave or something to get there and freezes it all, which is just sort of like my own peace of mind about Frozen 2 is Arendelle should have been destroyed, and then like for conclude there should have been like an epilogue which shows them rebuilding and like the entire civilization rebuilding Arendelle together to make a new one and starting afresh. And it also boggles my mind that they didn't do that, because you would have thought, even as like a Disney business executive, you'd be like, oh perfect, now we can sell a different version of Arendelle Castle or something as merchandise and make even more money that way. But I don't know, I guess not. It's the sort of thing where sometimes people, like, I suppose with focus grouping, they want to take a very sort of safe route and not have any like big consequences, I suppose, for his actions, because especially when it comes to like children's media, they think the children will be kind of upset. And to be fair, if Elsa died, I'm pretty sure the children would be quite upset, and rightfully so. And that's a sort of a balance thing. While it might have made a very compelling story for Elsa to die, you've got to balance up for the audience and the sort of decisions you're going to make. You're going to upset a lot of children for really no apparent reason. By just murdering off what a character which I'm sure a lot of children have idolised. And that's the sort of the balance you have when making a creative art, I suppose, while actually like not portraying it as a business, while actually trying to tie in with a business. Is you got to sometimes make things which are not always necessarily the best creative decisions, but make most sense in this sort of context. So I'm not saying they should have killed Elsa, because I think that would have been a little bit egregious. Olaf maybe, but also that sort of runs into the same problem of Elsa, because characters tend to get more appeal, I suppose. Well, actually I don't know if that's true, to be fair, but I assume characters appeal to children or audiences more than necessarily locations do. So I feel like destroying Arendelle wouldn't have been that big a deal, but apparently it is, or apparently it was, or at least a decision was made not to. And I suppose this kind of goes to like a focus grouping thing. Like I talked about this in like the worst song in the world. There's a song basically they asked if they focus group a load of songs or whatever and to find out what people liked and disliked in songs, and then they made a song which contains all the things that people liked in the song, and a song which contains all the things and properties which people didn't like from the song. And the one which people should have theoretically hated was a much more compelling song, at least in my mind, compared to the song which was full of things that people did like. Because the thing it's a sort of thing where you got to take creative risks in this sort of sense. If you try and focus group something to appeal to literally everyone, it's going to be like the equivalent of like a rounded off rock. It's going to be a perfect sphere. It's got no jags, no edges, nothing to really latch onto people. What if you have a rock with imperfections of that sort of thing? You get, maybe this isn't exactly the best example, because I suppose a very perfectly spherical rock would be very interesting, but if it was superficial, I suppose, but ones with imperfections and jags, or some and jagged parts, well, some people might not like it, some people will latch onto those sort of things, you know. You sort of just like change your focus audience or your focus group or whatever. Understand who you're appealing to, and you appeal to them, which is, you know, the whole intention of focus groups in the first place. And if you don't do it, you lead it off to very sort of like rounded off media properties, which appeal like 5 out of 10 sort of levels to everyone. Everyone just be like, this is inoffensive, but I don't care for it. That sort of thing. Now, of course, I'm not like a business major, so I haven't really done studies and that sort of thing, so perhaps don't really take what I say or too seriously, because I don't really have any evidence to substantially back it up. And, you know, I feel like there's a little bit of a danger of talking about opinions and not reiterating very clearly that I have no idea if these opinions actually hold up true to real world or not, because, you know, real world can often have much more deceiving sort of deceiving outcomes compared to what you might predict. I don't know if we're going to particularly make a snowman, because making a snowman is a bit boring. Well, it takes effort, basically. But we'll catch some snowflakes if we can find some. Like this one, and it's gone. Boom, and that is gone. So yeah. But, I mean, it seems like that Encanto, at least, is a little bit different. Sorry about that, a little bit of interruption as we carry on. What was I talking about? So, something about focus grouping, something about thinking, oh, well, we could make a snowman. The snowball's not that far away, I suppose. Sorry about that, a little bit of interruption again. Yeah, focus. Oh no, Encanto. It seems like it's pretty different. It seems rather well received, I suppose, compared to. I think we just broke it. At least, why are we pushing it down through this very delicate corridor? Makes it quite difficult to get anywhere. Yeah, I mean, Encanto seems rather well received, if anything. I've heard good things about it. I've heard the songs are absolute banger. But the only ones I know about is We Don't Talk About Bruno, and there's one called like Under Pressure, because I see it on my YouTube recommended sometimes. Apparently the songs are pretty good, you know. Which is certainly like one of my favourite things, you know. I like good music and I like animation. So those tend to be the things I tend to pay attention to, I suppose, most. Especially when it comes to a movie or that sort of aspect. So I'm excited to see how that comes out. Maybe I'll talk about it tomorrow, maybe I won't. In fact, probably tomorrow I'll probably do a Happy in Paradise episodes, because we didn't do one today. I think it'll work. Maybe not, this one might not be big enough. I do like making these very tiny snowmen, so... I think this could be a bit bigger, this one. I don't know if this is quite the right size. Let's do it like this. This should be okay? Perfect, Snowboy? Yeah, you're welcome. Just make sure that there's not another hidden recipe that we didn't know about, okay? A large snowflake. No recipe? Alright, so be it. Maybe I'll just round off this episode here. You know, I don't really have anything else to say. So fables, moral fables, that sort of thing. You know, we'll see what Encanto has to say, because Encanto has an interesting thing where the protagonist is basically the one which is not special in this sort of aspect, and everyone else in their family has superpowers and that sort of thing. But I don't know. Anyway, we'll round off this episode here, so if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares are greatly appreciated. Join me, Dear Darling, Discord, follow me on Twitter down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.